On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, day 143. Negotiators are reporting that Hamas is responding negatively to the framework of the Second Paris Summit for negotiations. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip states that 90 Palestinians were killed and 164 were injured in the last 24 hours. The number of Palestinians injured in the Gaza Strip crosses 70,000. Escalations between the IDF and Hezbollah. Over 60 rockets were launched towards Israel in the past 24 hours. The Palestinian government in the West Bank resigns as the Palestinian Authority prepares for a unity technocratic government with Hamas. Regarding the prospect of a future Palestinian state, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu states that Hamas in Gaza was a de facto state and look what they did with it. Hello everyone, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here to bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It is currently the evening of February 26, 2024 in the United States, the morning of February 27, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, while Hamas has yet to give its official answer to the Second Paris Summit, negotiators have conveyed pessimistic messages to Israel. According to negotiators, Hamas leadership abroad feels that the framework does not meet the minimum requirements of the group, and some reports suggest that there might be disagreement within the Hamas leadership about what to respond, which has led to them having a delayed response and not giving an official answer until now. In addition, there were reports in Israel that the first meeting in Qatar showed no advances with regards to moving forward in the negotiations, and that there are substantial differences between the sides. Somewhat countering these pessimistic messages, President Biden stated today that he hopes that a ceasefire can be reached by next Monday, that is March 4th. Other elements within the administration were a bit more skeptical, stating that they hope a deal can be reached by the beginning of Ramadan, which is March 11th. Both messages from the United States added that there are significant differences between the sides, however, these are being worked on and can be resolved. Meanwhile, there were some reports that were given today regarding what was actually discussed in the Paris Summit. According to one of those reports in the New York Times, the Israeli delegation proposed releasing 15 quote-unquote heavy Palestinian prisoners charged with murder and sentenced to life in Israel in exchange for the release of 5 female IDF soldiers. In addition, Al Jazeera reported that Israel agreed to a gradual return of internally displaced Palestinians to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, limiting it to those who are not of military age, i.e. women, children, and elderly. In addition, it was reported that Israel agreed to release 400 quote-unquote heavy Palestinian prisoners in exchange for 40 hostages. Again, all these reports are what Israel may have proposed as a framework for negotiations in the Paris Summit, i.e. what Israel was willing to negotiate. However, right now that is not even being negotiated yet. Amidst this, the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stated today that the full return of Palestinian civilians to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip will not occur until the return of all Israeli hostages. So right now, just summarizing the situation, everyone is still waiting for Hamas's response to the Paris Summit. The response is just going to lay down the framework to if they agree to negotiate. According to all sides, the next 2 weeks are critical until March 11th is sort of the window that has been given to these negotiations. That is the beginning of Ramadan. According to a lot of statements made in Israel, if a deal is not reached by Ramadan, Israel may invade Rafah. This is causing a lot of tension in Egypt and in the United States. Both countries want to see Israel not invading Rafah specifically during Ramadan, and thus these negotiations are currently trying to be worked out to just get to a framework that the sides can discuss. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there were rockets and mortars sent from the Gaza Strip targeting the southern parts of Israel today. These targeted primarily the areas of Kibbutz Re'im and Kisufim. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip is substantial ongoing activity and gun battles are reported in the Zaytun area. This is the area in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip that the IDF has been operating its ground units in the last week. The IDF stated that over 30 Hamas operatives were killed in different gun battles. The different sources on the ground stated that there's a lot of chaos going on within the Zaytun area, and that the IDF is continuing its operation and actually pouring more forces into the region. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF is continuing to excavate a tunnel that was discovered last week. Reportedly, the IDF has now uncovered that it is over 10 kilometers long, going underneath a Turkish hospital in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and a university campus in the southern parts of Gaza City. The tunnel connected the Gaza Strip from the northern section to the southern part, and is reportedly a strategic tunnel with a lot of different weapons caches, storages, and different rooms used for communications and command centers. According to reports, the IDF is working very hard to try to map out the tunnel network in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. As part of its attempt, should it get to a truce, the IDF wants to hold on to the Netzarim or Nusirat corridor that divides the southern parts of the Gaza Strip and the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, and wants to try to ensure that the underground networks are also cut off from the north to the south. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, that's where the bulk of the fighting remains in Khan Yunis. Al Jazeera reported today that the IDF is still operating in Nasser Hospital, despite statements that it withdrew from there several days ago. No reports were made from the ground regarding what is actually happening there. However, that is a report that came in today. In addition, there were very minimal reports regarding the ongoing activity in Khan Yunis. Usually, the IDF puts out statements, as well as statements from Al-Qassam brigades, the Al-Quds brigades, and different sources on the ground. Today, there were very few. There were reports of ongoing activity in the Abbasan region, that is the eastern parts of Khan Yunis, reports of gun battles, and that the IDF is still going house to house. However, very minimal reports regarding the actual fighting that is going on. Other news from the Gaza Strip. The Washington Post published an extensive article today about the hunt for Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. According to the report, Israeli intelligence suspects that Sinwar is still hiding under the tunnel network underneath Khan Yunis, and Israeli and U.S. intelligence officials are quoted as saying that beyond finding him, the problem will be carrying out an operation to capture or kill him, since intelligence agencies suspect that he has surrounded himself with hostages as human shields. Several days ago, there was a report that stated that in Israel there are some elements who think that Yahya Sinwar may have tried to evacuate to Rafah or possibly even flee the Gaza Strip into Egypt through the smuggling tunnels into the Sinai area. This was later denied by different elements in the IDF. Most intelligence reports suspect that Yahya Sinwar will not try to flee the Gaza Strip, nor will he accept any deal that includes his evacuation or expulsion from the Gaza Strip. Right now, according to at least the report of the Washington Post, he's estimated to still be in the Khan Yunis area. Other news, NBC reported today that Israel's plan to evacuate civilians from Rafah may include diverting them to Khan Yunis after the military operation in the city is concluded. The report adds, and this has been stated in the past several days by lots of other sources, that Israel does not plan to allow Palestinian civilians to return to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip as part of this evacuation. So this may be related to the fact that the IDF has recently expanded its operations to the eastern parts of Khan Yunis to the Abbasan area. It is possible that the IDF is trying to quote-unquote clear out the areas of Hamas operatives before diverting civilians from the areas of Rafah back to Khan Yunis. Remains to be seen. The U.S. State Department stated again today that the United States has yet to see plans for the IDF's operation in Rafah. Amidst these reports of the Rafah operation, it was reported today that the head of Israel's Shabak, Ronen Bar, and the IDF Chief of Staff, Herzi Halevi, traveled to Egypt last week and met with senior officials. According to different sources, their message was that Israel will coordinate the Rafah activity with Egypt and will not surprise the country, adding, however, that the war cannot be completed without the IDF carrying out its Rafah operation. No IDF soldiers were reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. The total number of IDF soldiers that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began remains 240. 8 IDF soldiers were injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. The total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began is 1,408. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting 90 Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 29,782. 70,043 Palestinians reported injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, and there's still several thousand that are buried under the rubble and presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. Amidst the reports of growing hunger throughout the Strip, Jordan carried out a substantial paradropping of food supplies in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. This was done in coordination with Israel and facilitated by France. According to reports, 4 cargo planes dropped supplies that included food, flour, rice, baby formula, and diapers. The supplies were dropped in 11 strategic places throughout the Gaza Strip from the north to the south, although later Hamas would state that this was only done in the center and the southern parts of the Strip. Some of the supplies accidentally reportedly landed at sea, and hundreds of Palestinians were seen at the beaches of the Gaza Strip trying to retrieve them. In addition, it was reported that in Rafah, Hamas operatives opened fire upon the population that was trying to get to the supplies and took over the supplies in at least one of the locations. Other news, Israel's war cabinet approved the IDF plans today to begin aid distribution in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Reportedly, this decision was reached after the head of the Mossad, Dedi Barnea, stated to the war cabinet that delaying the entrance of aid to the northern parts of the Strip will endanger a hostage deal and the negotiations that are currently ongoing. According to the plan, 8 trucks are going to be expected in the Kerem Shalom crossing or the Nitzana crossing. From there, they will travel through Israeli territory and enter designated corridors in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. In the last several weeks, it was reported that the IDF wants to develop a pilot in which the IDF soldiers themselves will either distribute the aid or that they will make contact with local Palestinian merchants and they will be in charge of distributing the aid. This is all meant to bypass international aid agencies and specifically UNRWA. It remains to be seen how the mechanism is actually developed. Moving on to the West Bank, there was substantial IDF activity that was reported in several different areas throughout the West Bank in the last 24 hours. In the Al-Farah refugee camp near Nablus, substantial confrontations broke out between the IDF and different Palestinian factions. Several Palestinians were reported injured and 2 were reported killed. According to some reports, one of those Palestinians who was killed is Ahmed Dragme. He's a Palestinian Islamic Jihad member and head of a Tubas unit that was in charge of carrying out violent activity in the area. Other IDF activities reported in the areas of Nablus, in Gilazon near Ramallah, Yatta south of Hebron, Azun, as well as in the areas around Jenin. A total of 22 Palestinians were reported arrested throughout the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there are continuing and ongoing escalations that I'm reporting almost every day in the last week between Hezbollah and the IDF in the last 24 hours. Rockets were sent from Lebanon targeting northern parts of Israel, specifically the areas of Margaliot, Goran, Arab al-Ramshe, Granot HaGalil, Even Menachem, the areas of Zarit and Shtuga, where there was also a direct hit. There was, in addition to this, a substantial barrage of rockets that was sent towards the Golan Heights. Hezbollah stated that they fired over 60 rockets in this barrage, targeting the areas of Sha'al or Tal, as well as Kidmat Tzvi. Hezbollah also claimed responsibility for 7 different border incidents against IDF outposts in the last 24 hours. In addition, a surface-to-air missile launched by Hezbollah managed to intercept an IDF Zik drone in the aerial space of Lebanon, causing it to crash. Regarding IDF activity, substantial IDF activity was carried out throughout Lebanon in the last 24 hours. Warplanes reportedly attacked Hezbollah structures in the Ita Sha'ab area, as well as carrying out a substantial attack in the Kahoba area, reportedly against the launching site from which the barrage against the Golan Heights was launched. In addition, an unusual attack was reported in the Baka area west of Baalbek. This is deep in the heart of Lebanon, some 100 kilometers north of the Israeli border. The IDF stated that warplanes attacked the aerial defense systems of Hezbollah in response to that surface-to-air missile that was launched against the Zik drone. Other attacks in the region also targeted a truck convoy in the Budai area. Al-Ahbar rejected these claims of the IDF, stating that the attacks in the Baalbek area targeted food warehouses and another house. In addition, Al-Manar reported that IDF phosphorus attacks were carried out in the Adaharia area, and other attacks were noted in the Anabatia and El Jibin area, as well as in the region between El Jarmek and Jabal El Rifai. Al-Miadin also reported that the IDF carried out artillery fire in the areas of Al-Saluki Valley, Hula Village, and Ramia. The IDF also reported that different tank fire was noted in the Kila village. Other news, Hassan Salami, who is a Hezbollah division commander of the eastern sector, specifically the Hajj region, was assassinated today. According to reports, he was in charge of anti-tank missile fire and attacks against Israeli military and civilian targets in the Kiryat Shmona area. He was reportedly killed in a drone attack against his car in the Al-Majdal area and the area of Tzor. Hezbollah announced that in these various attacks, 4 of its operatives were killed in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of operatives Hezbollah says were killed since the war began to 219. It is noteworthy that the number is increasing daily in the last week. The IDF says also that the number of Hezbollah operatives that were killed since the war began is much higher. In addition to this, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad also announced that 2 of its operatives were killed along the Lebanese border with Israel as they were trying to carry out violent activity in the area. Moving on to some of the regional developments, the U.S. Central Command reported carrying out attacks against 3 uncrewed sea vessels and 2 nautical missiles that were preparing to launch from Houthi territory. Earlier in the day, a drone was also reportedly intercepted in the Red Sea, with U.S. Central Command stated that it posed an immediate threat to U.S. ships and to the coalition forces in the area. Moving on to some of the political and general trends from the last 24 hours, the Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Mohammed Shatiyeh submitted his resignation to Palestinian Authority Chairman today. This effectively means that the Palestinian Authority government is going to be disbanded and a new government will be put in place in the near future. This is part of a coordinated move that is being done with the Palestinian Authority Chairman, as he came under monumental pressure from the United States to have deep reforms in the Palestinian Authority, and in recent weeks Hamas indicated that they may be willing to participate in a technocratic government that will bring together the factions in the Palestinian territories. it was coordinated that the Palestinian Authority Prime Minister would resign in order to enable, on the one hand, the creation or at least negotiations towards this new government. On the other hand, facilitate the Palestinian Authority chairman saying to the United States that he is beginning the process of these ongoing reforms. The U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller welcomed this resignation, stating that it is an important step towards unifying the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. He added that Palestinian Authority Chairman Abbas told the Secretary of State that he will carry out reforms in the Palestinian Authority, and the State Department welcomes these moves. In turn, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu responded to this in a Fox News interview today, stating that there haven't been elections in the Palestinian Authority for 17 years, and that this just constitutes a changing of seats. He added that Israel really wants to see a de-radicalization process in the Palestinian Authority, and that if they really wanted to reform, they should, and I quote, stop teaching their kids to be terrorists, stop funding terrorists, stop teaching each generation to destroy Israel. That would constitute real reform. Other political news, family members of hostages who are held in the Gaza Strip may be invited to President Biden's State of the Union speech that is due to be next week. Those invitations have not been issued yet. However, a lot of reports about this were circulated today. Other political news, Israel officially submitted its first report to the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, regarding its implementation of the injunctions that the ICJ required. So in addition to the requirement of Israel to enable free access of humanitarian aid, punish and avoid incitement to genocide, and avoid concealing evidence of genocide, Israel is also required to submit to the ICJ reports on how it is implementing these different injunctions. Israel reportedly submitted this report, which Prime Minister Netanyahu instructed to make extremely thin, stating that it is complying with the injunctions and that it was doing so anyway prior to any instructions of the court. Other political news, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated today in a meeting of the Human Rights Council in Geneva that the UN Security Council has failed to protect human rights both in the Israel-Hamas War and in the war between Russia and Ukraine. Responding, the Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, stated that the UN Security Council has indeed failed in its lack of condemnation of October 7th, adding, and I quote, "The Secretary General, who expressed an understanding for the massacre and dedicates himself only to the humanitarian situation in Gaza, bears the main responsibility for the UN agencies operating under him becoming terrorist supporters and some, like UNRWA, becoming actual terror organizations." Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip. So first, relating to this future Palestinian government, after the resignation, Palestinian factions are now going to meet in Russia this week in order to discuss internal reconciliation and the development of this future technocratic government. Palestinian Authority Chairman Abbas favors appointing Mohammed Mustafa, who's a prominent Palestinian businessman and politician, to lead the technocratic government, while he is being challenged by Mohammed Dahlan, who's a former Fatah strongman in the Gaza Strip, who is championing the appointment of Nasser al-Qidwa, who is Yasser Arafat's nephew, for the position. Hamas itself has not actually said who it favors to head this Palestinian government. Some reports are saying that Hamas is holding the cards close to its chest. They don't want to reveal who they want to lead this government. They want to see how negotiations develop. Other reports suggested that Hamas may actually be interested in having a prime minister of the government that does not belong to Hamas. This will also enable this government to get a lot more international funding and aid, while allow Hamas to actually rebuild itself underground, not being responsible for the official rebuilding of the Gaza Strip. Other news relating to the future of the Gaza Strip and regarding a future Palestinian state. The Israeli Ynet quoted senior officials in Israel today, stating that the United States is throwing its full weight behind the plan to advance a Palestinian state and have normalization with Saudi Arabia. It added that if the plans do not materialize before the elections in the United States, the administration will turn their back on Netanyahu. Sources added that Rafah remains a key point of disagreement between Israel and the United States, since Israel is pledging to invade Rafah before the war is over, and the U.S. would like to see a regional deal coming to fruition by June-July. The sources also added that this is in relation to the elections that are going to be in the U.S. in November, that June-July is really the deadline after which some sort of regional deal can come that will help Biden in the elections. Otherwise, likely the administration is, according to this report, going to turn its back on Netanyahu. Possibly as an indication to this weight that the United States is throwing behind this regional deal, the U.S. State Department stated today, and I quote, "All the United States can do is present our vision for peace and security in the Middle East and clearly tell the people and the government of Israel that there is a path forward toward a viable peace and good relations between Israel and its neighbors. If they're willing to do that, we're willing to work with them on the ways of achieving this." Prime Minister Netanyahu, in turn, was asked today in a Fox News interview about whether he thinks the Palestinian Authority wants a two-state solution. He answered, among other things, that he thinks that they want a one-state solution, adding, and I quote, Hamas in Gaza was a de facto Palestinian state. And what did they do? They used it to rape women, behead them, burn babies, murder children in front of their parents, and kidnap hostages. What we're seeing, again, is the growing collision between the vision of Prime Minister Netanyahu on the one hand and the vision of the United States on the other hand. The Palestinian Authority is trying to take active steps to at least show the United States that they are trying to implement these different reforms. However, at this point, it is unclear who is going to lead this technocratic government, even if it does come to fruition. In addition, it's not clear what is going to be its mandate. Is it going to be a government for both the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank as well as in the Gaza Strip? Is it only going to be in charge of the Gaza Strip? And most importantly, what is going to be the role of Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas? Is he going to be relegated to simply a ceremonial figure as a head of state, or is he going to hold on to the powers that he still has? If you find these reports useful, please do remember to subscribe, give them a like. If you want to know when reports come out, turn on notifications. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.